When you hear the term CPU, you probably think of a microprocessor from Intel or AMD that sits in your desktop or laptop computer. But in the connected age, there are a lot of devices, from smartphones and tablets to fancy Android game consoles to even things like anti-lock brakes and web-connected door locks that also need processors, with many of them powered by specialized CPUs based on technology from a company called ARM. So what exactly is an ARM CPU, and why don't you have one in your PC as well? Well, the PC processor scene has long been dominated by chips using an instruction set called x86, originally developed by Intel and only fully licensed out to a couple of other manufacturers, including AMD. ARM doesn't have the correct licenses to design x86 processors, and it's unlikely that Intel will be allowing anyone else to do so in the near future, given they even amended their cross-licensing agreement with AMD to prevent it from transferring to a third party if AMD gets acquired. Which is a bummer, because x86 is super awesome for some workloads, with high-end Core i7 chips able to handle complex instructions that tell the processing cores to do a lot of things at once. An ARM CPU, by contrast, is optimized for simpler instructions that are closer to the metal than x86, so the processor doesn't have to do as much sorting and arranging to get to the actual meat of the work. Think of it like trying to help your buddy move apartments. If he dumps a huge pile of dirty dishes and disassembled IKEA furniture in front of you and tells you all at once what to do with it, that's a lot of friggin' work to remember what he said and then actually do it. Well, that's what x86 can do. But if he's a reasonable person and has all his stuff laid out neatly for you once you get there and tells you as you go where he wants everything stored, you'll probably have a much easier time of it. Just like you'll expend less energy in the second scenario, an ARM CPU also uses much less energy than a typical x86 processor, which is monumentally important for preserving battery life in mobile devices. These energy savings can be seen in an ARM CPU's drastically reduced heat output as well, about 15 times less than your average Core i7, which you could probably fry an egg on if you weren't using a heatsink. So while x86 is superior for heavy workloads, not to mention that its continued use enables backwards compatibility with games and apps that were written decades ago, for devices that perform only simpler tasks and whose app development was mostly done in the last half a dozen years, like smartphones, ARM is perfect. Okay, Linus, cool, but while you've mentioned ARM and cell phones together a lot, I thought most cell phones use Apple A-series or Qualcomm Snapdragon processors. Well, ARM doesn't actually make their own chips at all. Instead, other companies buy designs from ARM's engineers and integrate them into their own products, sometimes even modifying them, sometimes significantly, for specific purposes, as Apple has been known to do, giving them the flexibility to build the CPU around their device's design rather than the other way around, a paradigm-shifting change. But what does the future hold for ARM's technology? Microsoft's Surface RT series tablets demonstrated that it's unlikely to replace x86 and Windows PCs anytime soon, but as it continues to improve, power-sipping devices will get closer and closer to the functionality of your desktop, not to mention that app compatibility will improve, and we're even starting to see ARM appear in servers, so Google doesn't have to work quite so hard to cool off their server.